Welcome to the Infinite Life podcast. I'm your host, Katish Haberfield. As a spiritual regression therapist, spirit releasement therapist, and medium, I help my clients to break free of karmic behaviors and limiting beliefs impacting their lives. This free podcast takes you behind the scenes in sessions with my clients as they experience regression sessions and celestial healings, as they access the wisdom of their sub and superconscious mind and witness the unfolding story of their soul. I hope this podcast provides you with inspiration and insights that can be applied to your life. Welcome back to the Infinite Life podcast. This week we have a very special guest, the only guest for this season, Tina Erwin.
Thank you so much, Katish. I love working with you.
It's great to have you. Now, for those of you who are new to the podcast, Tina was our very first guest in season 1 of the podcast. And we're now up to season 6, I think it is. So it's great to have Tina back. For those of you who haven't met Tina before, Tina is a retired naval commander in the US Submarine Force. She is an author of, is it 8 books, Tina?
8, yes.
8 books. She's a psychic and she's also a ghost helper. So in our original episode, Tina and I talked about how you can help ghosts cross over to the light. So we spent a lot of time going through children and psychic children and understanding what ghosts are and how you can help them. We also talked about the crossing over prayer and the crossing over prayer book, and the ways that it can help you provide service to souls who are stuck and need help. But today, I thought we would focus exclusively on Tina's expertise in protection and understanding people, helping people understand how to protect their human assets, so their aura and all of their energetic fields, from any kind of psychic attack, and also from the possibility of any tears and holes in your aura and attachment by spiritual beings. So Tina, this is quite a wide topic. Can you let us know a little bit about your original history as a commander and how you got used to protecting physical assets like submarines and human beings, and then how that transferred into protecting human beings from things that can't be seen?
I would be happy to. I spent 20 years working with and for the United States Submarine Force. And I did a variety of things for them, but my most significant job, I was the Assistant Chief of Staff for Force Physical Security, Anti-Terrorism, and Law Enforcement for Commander Submarine Force, U.S. Atlantic Fleet. It was the best title I ever had. And that meant that my job was to protect 86 submarines, 9 submarine tenders, 3 submarine rescue ships, 4 submarine bases, and the senior Jewish admiral in the Navy. And it was a very difficult job. At the same time, it was one of the most eye-opening jobs I have ever had. And it enabled me to understand that terrorism, and that's what we're trying to do, is protect. I had $100 billion in assets to protect, not chump change. And the concept of protecting an entire submarine with 24 nuclear missiles, or a submarine base, or all the fast attack submarines and all the armament that they carry, and understanding that if you fail, it could be a cataclysm. And I was very humbled by the job. But it also meant that I realized that I had no idea how to do this job. Let's face it, there's no school you go to where somebody says, oh, this is how you do this. And I decided that the best thing I could do was to educate myself with as many amazing people as I possibly could. And I had access to SEAL Team 6. And for people who don't know, SEAL Team 6 is a really remarkable team that goes in and does a lot of covert operations. and they have divers and all kinds of things. But I didn't know what I didn't know. That's a really big deal. If you're looking at protecting $100 billion submarine or yourself, it doesn't matter. You're protecting an asset, and you have to understand what you don't know.
Mm.
And once I started working with this SEAL Team 6, they said, you really need to go to school. And I said, great. What school is there? And they said, you should go to terrorist school. And I said, okay, where is that? And it was in Panama City, Florida.
Okay.
And they sent ambassadors, CIA agents, drug enforcement agents, people from other countries to a school that taught you how terrorists think, how they operate, how they attack something, and what vulnerabilities existed, and how you counter every vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first element I learned is that there's just not one answer. If you do just this one thing, you're all done.
Mm.
And it's the concept that if you are in the frozen tundra of some country or some state in the United States, like Alaska, and it's 200 below zero, you're not walking around in your underwear. You're going to need long underwear. You're going to need layers of clothing and boots and gloves and hats and scarves and long underwear. So what happens is the more layers of protection you have, the greater protection you will have, the more confidence you can move forward with whatever you're doing. And those layers of protection can take some very esoteric forms. And I'll give you a vignette that happened in terrorist school.
Okay.
In the I think it was 1977, and I was living in Italy at the time with the Navy. General Dozier was kidnapped. He was working with he was a U.S. general, but he was working with NATO. And they warned him. He was in Italy. They said, you got to pay attention to things. And his wife said, I think somebody's watching our apartment. And he said, oh, don't be silly. So he kept the same pattern every day. Mm. And she kept saying, I have this bad feeling. We're talking psychic here. But in a very practical military setting, she said, I have this really bad feeling. So when the terrorists broke in, kidnapped him, beat her up, and locked her away, her psychic sense was 100% accurate, and he dismissed her, just literally almost cost him his life. Mm. So he's whisked away. It's happened so fast. What happened next was, and I didn't realize this till I was in terrorist school like 15 years later, was that the CIA used remote viewers, again, now we're back to the esoteric, to locate General Dozier in Italy.
Wow, okay.
And I know exactly how they did it. They were working with the Carabinieri, they were working with Interpol and all these different agencies. But when you work with a ton of alphabet agencies, a lot gets lost in translation. What a remote viewer can zero in. And they located the building. And finding someone who's been kidnapped as a remote viewer, I've done it. It's really hard. They located the building about the same time that the Carabinieri found him. And so what was fascinating for me in multiple dimensions was that the remote viewers were 100%. Mm. The second thing was that they were believed, and the general was so humble now when he spoke to the group, because he was the speaker at terrorist school, telling all of us that you have to pay attention to that little voice in your ear. He's a retired general. He's not going to say, if you have a psychic sense, never going to say that. It's a guy thing. Yep. You have a gut feeling, you ought to pay attention to it. Yep. But we know it's a psychic sense. And the CIA has been using remote viewers for a very long time. As I'm listening to that and I'm understanding how the esoteric world is filtering into the day-to-day world and how terrorism is infiltrating in so many different places, it's not really that much different all those years ago than it is now. That it taught me how to understand terrorism. If you're psychic or you think you're the victim of a psychic attack, you're a victim of a terrorist attack. You don't know who it is. You don't know when it's coming. You just know that you feel really bad. And that enabled me to begin to understand, what do you have to do to protect yourself? So that is how I got started, because it's always going to be a layered approach. I do a lot of different things. Most people in their right mind wouldn't go to the levels I go to, but they don't do what I do. So it's understandable. In a day-to-day world, there's a lot of things you can do. So that's how I got started.
Okay. And I'll just pause here because I know what you're talking about with remote viewing, but there may be somebody who's new to the podcast. Can you just explain to somebody who hasn't heard of the term remote viewing before what it is and the concept, basically?
Remote viewing is the concept that you can take a photograph of a person and build a link with that person. It actually goes back to string theory, which I know is extremely esoteric. But we live in the third dimension of time and space and gravity. When you connect to a person you love or you despise, you're still connected to them. You are connected through what's called an Akar chord. A remote viewer builds a connection either with a photograph of the person or a location, and then they build a link to that location. Once they have that, they physically, psychically project a consciousness and an energy to the location. And as weird as this sounds, you can literally stand in the room and look around.
Okay.
It seems very strange, but it's extremely powerful.
Absolutely. And where in your journey did you learn to do that? Whilst you were in the force, or was this afterwards that you learned this skill of remote viewing?
I retired in 1992 from the Navy. So I've been retired a really long time. And after I retired, I was trying to decide what to do. And I had a computer company. I designed software that I was working with Apple Computer, and I was doing 20 trade shows for Apple Computer. They loved the software I designed. And we were going to put it in every new home in America. It was revolutionary at the time. And if that had been successful, we wouldn't be having this conversation. At one of the trade shows, this man gave me his business card. And that was on February 28th of 1993. And from that moment forward, my life went to hell. I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't think straight. I eventually reached the point I couldn't drive a car. I didn't sleep all night. I couldn't walk. I felt like madness was setting in. And it happened over a period of 30 days. And I didn't understand. I knew it was a psychic attack, but I didn't understand what that was, much less how do I get myself out of this feeling of horrible pressure that I can't define and I can't explain. I couldn't stop sneezing. I couldn't stop coughing. I would cough until I'd vomit, and then I couldn't breathe. It's as if the very life that was within me was being sucked out and destroyed. And I hope to heavens no one else ever has to go through that. It was horrific. At the same time, it was remarkable because I'm grateful for the experience because it taught me so much and it forced me to learn to do things I could not have imagined. I reached the point, I knew I was dying, and my husband hadn't retired yet from the Navy. He was going to work, and I said, if you leave, I'm going to be dead by noon. I can feel death coming. There's no doubt in my mind. I'm dying. He said, does this mean you, of all people, will actually go to a hospital? And I said, I have no choice. I'm dying. So he rushed me to the ER, and the guy said, oh my God, your lungs are 90% shut down. It took them hours to bring me back. And he said, oh, I think you're an asthmatic. And I said, I'm not an asthmatic. I'll never be an asthmatic. You can't be in the Navy and have asthma, by the way. I know what caused this, and I'm going to make sure this never happens to me again. He said, fine, you have to see a pulmonologist. So I did, and I had to see all these other people. Well, one of the people I had to see was a woman who was a doctor from India. She was amazing. I told her what happened, and she said, you know what happened to me? You're going to be fine. So then I went to the pulmonologist, and he said, you're a naval officer. What happened to you? And I said, you won't believe me. He said, I promise I'll believe you. And I said, I was psychically attacked. And I know that's what it was. I now understand it. It's not going to happen again. And I don't need long-term care. I need to get to work. He said, okay. He said, we're seeing an epidemic of this. An absolute epidemic of people who have no history of breathing problems showing up, and all of a sudden it's just like overnight they can't breathe. I said, it's psychic, and if you don't think that energy can be projected, you need to think again. And he said, okay, all right, this is a huge lesson for us. Well, I learned that I took that business card that man gave me, and I didn't understand what to do. I know now, but I didn't know. So I wrapped it. My brother told me to wrap it in silk. But you know how people wrap it? If you wrap something in silk to protect yourself from it, you have to change direction of the silk, because silk becomes impenetrable if you do that. And it's like somebody turned a switch and I was myself again. It was astonishing. One evening, the individual who did this to me decided that I was basically shoving all his energy back to him, and he died. And it was evening, and I'm talking to my brother and my husband, and we're having a conversation about how astounding the events have been. And all of a sudden, it's like I closed my eyes briefly and I could see him dying and I could feel him dying. And I knew that this was a remarkable moment. He left his body. I could see the EMTs come. I could see them pronounce him. I'd never done remote viewing really consciously before, and now I can see this in real time, crystal clearly. As he's dying, all these horrible dark beings come at him. And this is identical to the movie Ghost that came out in the 90s with Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore and Whoopi Goldberg. They're called lower realm intelligences. And they came at this man, and it was going to be horrible. And my brother says, we should cross him over. And I said, sounds like a good plan. And as soon as we said we should do this, it's like this giant rock rolled by and this crescent of golden light appeared. And I brought in an angel to help guide him. And these beings are just clawing, and he's horrified. And he's about to step into the light, and he turns and he said, I tried so hard to kill you. Why would you help me? I said, dude, you're not mine to judge. You are not mine to judge, but if you cross over, you might get more help than you could possibly imagine. It is a better thing I'd do for you. this than to allow you to be tortured by those beings that I can see. And then he was gone. And from that point on, I began to study hundreds and hundreds of books and documents to understand at the most infinite level how this worked. So and I didn't study to be a remote viewer. It was so exhausting to remote view that I would be wiped out for 2 days every time I did it. It took me years to develop a skill set where I could do it as quickly as I can do it now. It's like any muscle, you develop it.
Yeah. Can I just go back to that business card? So I guess my first instinct would have been to throw that in the bin or to shred it or something like that or burn it. Can you tell me why you chose to put the silk on it rather than to destroy the card? What's the difference energetically?
Even if you cut it in half, even if you throw it away, put it in the trash bin, whatever alternative you have, part of it is still emanating. It's still connected to you. And the only way, we were still new, we simply didn't know all there was to know. We did know that we could get this to fully stop was to use silk.
Okay.
And this, it was a horrible moment. And I remember my brother saying, "Go get silk." And I said, "I love my scarves. What am I going to do?" And he said, "Go get me a piece of silk." And I said, "Am I going to get it back?" And he said, "Oh my God, no, pick something you hate."
Okay. So any piece of silk will do. So a silk scarf or silk.
It could be a silk blouse that you don't wear anymore. You tear it up and you have those pieces. But there's a much cheaper solution today.
Okay.
You can use, and when I go through all the things you can do, I'll share that. In that moment, silk that had a crisscross pattern, you do one way and then you do the other way, stop the magic. Because basically you have to stop the energy from penetrating and emanating. It's like it's emanating and it's pulsing. And once you have contained it, then you can throw it away. And we did throw it away.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I just wanted to ask that before I forgot. Yeah.
That's a good question.
Does that, and a related question, but does then, if you wear silk clothing, does it have any protective natural components in it like that as if you wear silk blouses or silk underwear? Does the same sort of thing happen if you were?
I just saw a very interesting story of a woman who was attacked in India for being a witch. She wasn't a witch. She just rejected this man's advances. The family labeled her a witch and almost beat her to death. She was wearing silk. So the answer is no.
No. Okay.
She had on a beautiful silk sari. Sorry. Didn't help her because too much of her was exposed. And you can't run around looking like a mummy.
No, I was just wondering. Yeah.
Silk is great because it's a high frequency fabric. I mean, I can do a dissertation on the fabrics that are high frequency, especially when you wear them. So in that case, in the future, I wouldn't use silk. I have another tool to use.
Yep. Okay. That's fine. You know what they say, ask a dumb question and you get enlightened with the answer. So thank you for explaining that. But
it's not a dumb question. It's an excellent question.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I'll let you continue.
Once I started studying, I came to understand that we are all connected through something called Akar chords. We're all familiar with the word Akashic records, but the root word for Akashic is AKA. Aka it comes from the Hawaiian root word, which are the Hawaiian concept of Huna. The root word Aka comes from the Huna tradition, and those individuals were one of the original 12 tribes. You can find remnants of this word among the languages of the original 12 tribes. So I'm studying languages as well. When I began to understand how Akar chords work, you have this thin, what's called Akar substance that connects you to every person you've ever met, every place you've ever been, everything you've ever seen, every event. That's why if you see something happening, you go, oh my gosh, I stood right there, because you have a connection to it. It goes again back to string theory and on higher levels, quantum entanglement. We are all connected. And when we say that, we don't really know what that means. I'm connected to you because we have continued encounters. One of the hardest things is if you have a divorce, you have a huge Akar chord, I mean, a big, thick Akar chord to the person you were married to. Sometimes you can relieve a lot of stress in your life by cutting the Akar chords between you. It's not that you're hurting the other person, because the first rule is to do no harm. But when you cut the Akar chord, you then stop that energetic connection, and you can both function a lot better over time. And there's some tools to do that. If you create an Akar chord to someone, which that individual did, he met me, he shook my hand at a convention, a trade show I did for Apple. And then he cemented it, giving me his business card, which I kept with my day timer, and it was always with me, and it was near me. And when I put all those pieces together, I realized what I had done inadvertently. And I was specifically targeted so that I wouldn't be able to do the things that I can do that help. The crossing over prayer has helped millions and millions of souls. And it's a huge help. So if dark forces, and that's what we're talking about, let's just call it what it is, they're dark forces. If they can anticipate that this person might have a larger job to do in the future, and they're totally ignorant, they don't know, they're just getting through the day, then there might be something that they do that tries to stop you. And if you can begin to wrap your brain around, something is trying to hurt me, I can't see, I don't understand, and I don't know how to combat this, that's the first step toward freedom. So let me stop there. How am I doing?
Yep, good. That all makes sense to me.
Okay. Then I began to look at frequency. Everything is frequency. And I have a book, Karma and Frequency book, which enables you to understand what lowers frequency and what raises frequency. The higher your frequency, the harder it is for dark forces to bridge that delta gap. And you just you're not worth the effort. You harden the target, which is what we did protecting every submarine. We protected every submarine. We hardened them as a target. We made it so hard to have them attack, we made it so hard for someone to try to attack them. We ran SEAL team runs against them, that they were hardened as a target. They will pick a softer target. I didn't want to be somebody's soft target anymore. I'm not somebody's victim. I made my mind up about that. The first step is understanding that when you are vulnerable, your auric field is your force field. In Star Trek, we put shields up. Our auric field is our immune system. It is our protective shield. And once you have that shield and it's fully intact, that's really hard for somebody to penetrate that. But sometimes as a child, that force field is devastated and shredded through every kind of abuse. The worst abuse is sexual, because sexual abuse is an initiation into black magic. I'll just call it what it is.
Mhm.
The child doesn't know that, but that's what it is.
Okay.
And I have a plethora of clients for whom that happened to. They're also really psychic, and they chose the path of light, but it's a tough path to recover from because they have a vulnerability in their auric field. And depending on the level of sexual abuse, their auric field looks like Swiss cheese. It looks like somebody took 7/0 buckshot and just shot their auric field. It's covered with holes. And inside every one of those holes, there's a little thing that looks like a watch battery. It's about the size of a little tiny thin battery. And that's what causes fibromyalgia. And fibromyalgia, and there you may have listeners that say, oh, I don't agree with her. But I've spoken to physicians, board certified physicians, that will agree that virtually 100% of the patients that they have with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, were sexually abused.
Very interesting.
Because their auric field was so brutally violated. It was a pathway for this horrible energy. And every one of those little batteries can be triggered at any time. And that soul is like a puppet on a string. I hope this isn't too deep for listeners, but it's time somebody talked about this.
Yeah. I have some very good friends with fibromyalgia, so that's very interesting.
And so a person with fibromyalgia, there's really very little I can do, because the Akar chords, literally, it's like when the Lilliputians bound Gulliver in Gulliver's Travel. They're completely bound and controlled. If someone was sexually abused, they don't have fibromyalgia, I have a chance to help them by teaching them how to raise their frequency and how to protect themselves. And let's pretend that you have a psychic child, and the child sees ghosts. I'm going somewhere with all this. And this child is not abused. A couple of the steps that you need to do, you need a green light bulb. Isn't that funny? A simple, the hardware stores and places used to carry them. They were called party lights, just a simple green light bulb. Mm-hmm. The frequency of that green would keep lower realm intelligences and ghosts or dark beings out of a bedroom. Something as simple as that. You could put that green light bulb just on a plug thing underneath the bed. You could use it as a night light. You put it in the hall. You could put it in a closet. And all of a sudden, your child can sleep at night. If your child has the same issue night after night and you're not paying attention, you're torturing your own child. Pay attention. A green light bulb is a huge help. What else can you do? If you're listening to this, make a list, write it down. The next one is a little bowl. It doesn't have to be gigantic, just a small bowl of salt. Not Epsom salts, but sea salt, sodium chloride. Put that bowl under your bed. Because a lot of times things that the child feels are under their bed are energies under the bed. You put salt there, they cannot operate in salt. Salt works in every single dimension. It is one of the most precious and treasured substances in all of the universes and in all of the dimensions. In my mind, it ranks right up there with gold and copper. It's really remarkable. So, if you're having a lot of trouble sleeping and you feel like you're under attack, green light bulb, salt under the bed, a glass of salt next to your bed, a glass of salt water next to your bed. Pour it into the toilet the next morning. If you have the septic system, that might be problematic. But my point is that what happens is The salt acts like this kind of an energetic field in itself that is protective. Bathe at night. You enter the sleep state as clean as you can possibly be. If you don't have a septic system, bathe with salt. Just a teaspoonful in a washcloth or a little land wash glove. Cover your whole body, especially your feet. Do an amazing amount of work. They pick up all kinds of stuff, even when you're wearing shoes. Scrub your feet with salt. You won't believe how amazing that is. And there are some foot salt lamps, by the way. You can rub your feet on salt, maybe during the day. It's really a good thing to do. It's interesting how powerful is salt. During the Middle Ages, when plague was sweeping through Europe, the people who survived were the people who made it to the salt mines in Salzburg, and there were salt mines in France and I think Spain. Once they were in the salt mines, plague died. It couldn't live. That evil, that darkness couldn't live in the presence of pure salt. Very important to understand. The other people who survived plague were the French perfume workers. They were surrounded and breathing and on their clothing and their hands, essential oils. Their frequencies were so high, plague, their immune systems were so high just from the oils. They had a natural protection. When you go to sleep at night, put essential oils on your feet. You can put them in a carrier oil of castor oil or coconut or olive oil, frankincense, myrrh, lavender, sweet orange oil. I probably use 25 oils on my foot thing at night. And once you do that, you end up with a super high frequency substance on your feet. Your feet are the template of your entire body. Ask any acupuncturist. If you want to acupuncture on your feet, you will find you can heal a lot of things. If you're adding oils to your feet or your child's feet or your baby's feet, you are really helping to promote a strong immune system. The stronger your immune system, the more protected you are psychically. That's why essential oils. I make my own face cream, and I have, again, about 25 different essential oils in it, especially if you're putting it on your third eye. If you feel like you're psychic, but you want to protect your third eye, which is for those people on a video, on your forehead, between your two eyes, above your eyebrows, I use white angelica, which is a young living oil, but there are equivalent oils other places. You can also use frankincense. Something to understand if you are building a special oil, frankincense and myrrh are truly amazing oils because myrrh turbocharges frankincense. When you look at, I remember as a kid asking, okay, the three wise men brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh to the Christ child. Why? What's a frankincense? What's a myrrh? And then I got patted on the head a lot. Don't bother me. And I never gave up wanting to understand why was that important for Christ. Okay, gold, you need it for trading in money and things, but what is it about these? And what is it? It's a resin. It can be a liquid. It can also be an essential oil. There is another substance called dragon's blood and benzoin. So let's say that you're going to bed at night and we've got the green light and the salt under the bed and the glass of salt by the bed, and you've washed your feet and you put all those oils on your feet and you did your face cream and you got your essential oils and all of that. If you want to really cleanse the room, let's say you've been in a really icky business meeting and you just feel, even though you took a shower, it just still feels icky. It's a good thing to burn resin. A lot of people burn sage. I am here to tell you, sage is great for sausage and ceremonies. It is worthless for anything psychic. I don't know how this got started. People go, Native Americans use it. Yeah, for ceremonies. They're not using it to get rid of evil spirits, let me tell you. So if you are using a resin and a bulk apothecary, and there are many amazing companies out there that carry resins. My 4 favorite resins are dragon's blood, benzoin, frankincense, and myrrh. You can burn any one of them separately. You can make a blend of the 4. And what happens is you have this white smoke that comes up. You can stand around it. You burn it in a resin cup, and that smoke literally covers your auric field and washes your auric field. Make sure you have a window open so that negative energy can leave. You can dragon's blood your car, your home, your boat, your person. Every place I call it dragon's blooding, but you can use those resins in all of these locations. And let's say you buy a house and the house just doesn't feel like you. The auric residue of the previous residence is still there. That's not a bad thing. That's just a reality. Take your resin with your these burning resins, walk around your house, it will start clearing all that energy.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I know that somebody might say to me, okay, I understand that principle, and we know that essential oils come from the resin. So they're steam distilled to make the essential oil from the resin. So somebody might say to me, okay, but I've got the essential oil. Why do I need to get the resin as well? What's the energetic difference?
Oh, another really good question. I would offer that the energetic difference is that the resin, the essential oil, is really expensive. And if you feel something is happening quickly and you burn a resin, that smoke comes up and you can clear a room in a heartbeat. If you're using an oil, you're spraying it everywhere. You can use that. But I don't know if you've priced frankincense oil lately, but it's freaking expensive. Yep. A tiny bottle is $75. Yep. And the oil is working on your auric field. The resin burning and smoke is working on an entire geographic area, a room. So you need them for both. And I found out that a lot of people in the Middle East boil frankincense tears, they're little tiny pearls or tears, and then strain the water off and drink frankincense water internally.
Okay.
So you're using it internally, externally, and then globally.
Okay.
Because they do different things.
Yep.
They just do different things.
That's a great answer.
If you don't have any resin and you still want to shift negative energy, I had a client in Texas with super psychic kids, and she didn't have any of these things. You can cut inexpensive, you can find inexpensive apples and onions. Onions are one of the cheapest, humblest, and most powerful vegetables on the planet. They help set your body up to fight cancer. And if you cut onions in half and put them on a paper plate, in all the rooms you think you have problems, you will shift the energy in the room with apples and or onions.
Okay.
Some people also use oranges. An amazing oil is sweet orange oil. Because what sweet orange oil does is it cleanses the air. It does something a little different than the resins if you're going to spray it. If you spray lavender, it helps you to sleep at night. It calms the air. It calms the energy in the room. You're using different things for different purposes.
It's very interesting to hear you talk this way, Tina, because I spent 5 years studying and teaching people about essential oils. Funny how this now comes back to fruition with the energetic side of things, because I was using it at a really baby's level energetically and using it to manage illnesses and skincare and hair care and stress. But at that time, I didn't know this energetic level. So it's interesting how that was like a foundation level of information that now that you're explaining these things, it's so much more helpful to bring back in that knowledge that you had and then extend that knowledge and help people understand from the basis of the knowledge that you originally had. Everything that you learn in life is like a layer, isn't it? It comes back in some way to then you add on more information and you learn more and more about things.
That's absolutely true. I had to learn about essential oils. Somebody mentioned the word to me and I didn't know what that meant. I had to learn about all the different things that all of them do. And along the way, I learned about something called Noni juice. In Brazil, they use acai berry. In Southeast Asia, and I think in some parts of Central America, but I've actually never seen it there. But I know Southeast Asia and the Pacific, they use Noni, Morinda citrifolia. It's been used for those people for 5,000 years. It dramatically strengthens your immune system. It's really quite remarkable. Now, there's something else that, getting back to the immune system, back to your force field, which was, I'm returning to your original question here.
Yep.
I want to make sure I'm staying on task, as you asked. And it has to do with when a person has suffered abuse, or they have a lot of anger, or it look like they have demons with them. I've had two or three clients with this very unique problem. And it's interesting you mentioned that you learned about essential oils and now you're learning to use them in a whole new and different way with a different purpose and intention. In the 70s, I learned about a doctor in Indiana who discovered something called a syndrome called pyroluria. Pyroluria. And I encourage anyone who hears me talk about this, do your own research. You don't have to believe me. Pyroluria is basically an absence of pyroxidine, which is vitamin B6 in the body. And people can get a hair sample and get a test and see if they're deficient in P5P, which is vitamin B6, and B vitamins, zinc, manganese, magnesium, and some C. I think there's 6 or 7 of these basic chemical elements that the body needs to keep the personality on an even keel. When a person has experienced a series of horrible shocks, you'll say, my God, they're a different person. They say that something like 60% of alcoholics and drug abusers have pyroluria at the beginning. Excuse me. And because of that, these individuals have no idea that they are deficient. They think that an enormous majority of everyone in the prison system has an absence of these essential elements that the body needs. Without them, your auric field looks like Swiss cheese. And I had a very interesting case in San Diego where this boy was 10 years old and his 15-year-old brother was terrified of him. He tried to kill his brother, and the mother didn't know what to do. And I said, tell me, did this come on? She said, well, he's always been difficult. But it's like all of a sudden something happened. I said, but what happened? Usually that's 3 things took place that caused this child to be tipped over. Where is the tipping point? Let's look for it. And she said, I don't know. He was close to his grandfather and his grandfather died. Okay, so that's number 1. I said, what's the second one? She thought until she says, oh, within 2 months we moved and he moved away from his best friend. That's 2. That's 2 huge griefs. And number 3, his dad's a SEAL and he went to Iraq for 2 years. 3 huge. Kid wasn't the same. He didn't know how to handle that level of grief. And he became this explosive, angry, almost uncontrollable person. And I asked her, would she be willing to try this? I'm not a physician. I don't have any certificates on the wall. I just study a lot. And I said, these are just supplements that you can buy over the counter. And we did some muscle testing type things to determine dosage for a 10-year-old. And I said Noni juice, because Noni juice is a blood cleanser. And it pulls toxins out of the body. I also had her use French green clay. It's also called iolite clay. And iolite attaches in the intestinal and colon and that tract, that whole gastrointestinal tract, to toxins and starts to flush them out of the system. And so I'm building this complicated picture here. So you have this personality with this rage, and their personality's changing, and all these shocks happen to them. And now you're introducing this supplement world. And you have to slowly but surely, you put just a pinch of the iolite in their tea or whatever they're drinking. You get them to drink the Noni juice. Okay, that begins to calm their behavior. It helps to calm them. Then you start introducing the supplements, B12, B6, manganese, magnesium, zinc. Not having enough zinc, vitamin D, some of the most basic elements. And I had remote viewed his body first. And I said, his guy's auric field looks like Swiss cheese. And all these beings are walking right in and out. He was sitting in front of me, and I watched his blue eyes become black. I had never had that experience before. It was chilling to the bone. They wonder, how can somebody murder their whole family? I saw it in that kid's eyes.
Yeah.
That's it. If you've never seen it, you can't wrap your brain around it. So the mom did everything. Every last thing I told her to do, suggested. I'm careful of my terminology here. She examined and evaluated all of the suggestions, and it took about 2 months. He had friends again. He could sleep at night. If you don't sleep, you can undergo a personality change. Mm-hmm. And he was being so psychically attacked and manipulated that all of a sudden, it's like he woke up to who he genuinely could be. And when I remote viewed him after that, his entire auric field was united. It was one piece. There were no more Swiss cheese holes. So all these people who take supplements, they're not crazy. They're keeping their immune system, their auric field intact. His brother wasn't afraid to live with him. And as he got older, he continued them. And he's a productive member of society today. Now he's responsible for continuing them, but you feel so much better when you are on them. It's just remarkable. I had a similar case of a teenage girl, 17, she's a senior in high school. She had murderous ideation. She fought every day not to take a gun to school and kill her classmates. Every day. And her mother had been to everybody. No doctor could help this child. They'd taken her to psychiatrists, psychologists, MDs. They all gave up. And they said, you're our only hope. Thinking, wow, no pressure there. So I did the same thing with this family. And I got her to do those things. She could relax because she wasn't constantly being attacked by these dark beings. Her parents divorced. She had multiple shocks in her life as well. I'm not saying this happens to everybody.
No.
I'm saying that for some personalities, this can be a problem. If you have a super psychic kid who feels like there are dark things, you may want to consider a really good vitamin regimen that includes those things to make sure that child has enough of the most basic chemical elements that make up the physical body. Because what you strengthen in your physical, you are powerfully strengthening in your auric field, your etheric. Okay, so how am I doing?
Good. I'll stop you for a minute. I just want to check. My schedule is clear, but we're on an hour. Do you have anything that you need to go to now?
No, I scheduled 2 hours.
Okay, great. Perfect. That's all right. So I didn't want to stop you without checking. I'm fine to continue. So that's great. And I have a question that I want to ask you before, which I can cut out. I'm really interested because I think the last time I got an email from you, and so you may decide to answer on or off for this, on the record or off the record. One of your email signatures about a year ago now had Lifewave patches on them. I'm interested to know, have you found that the patches have been helpful? Because when you're talking about supplementation, I know how the Lifewave patches work. Have you found that those patches have been helpful in the same sort of way to the auric field? Have you even looked at it? I don't know how you found Lifewave patches in the end.
I'm connected to many different people who do various types of healing. And we're in a community where as we find something that's helpful, we share it with each other.
Yep.
And I'd never heard of Lifewave. I hadn't. And I started it in September and I signed up and I am a distributor for it. This is not a commercial, but you asked me the question. And what Lifewave does is it rebuilds and reactivates stem cells in the body. And as you get older, your stem cells don't keep replacing themselves, which is as what happens as you age. Well, what if that didn't have to happen? What if you could activate them and help them to heal and grow? That's the basis of Lifewave. It's not saying that it's going to heal you. There's no claims here. And I've tried a variety of them, and so has my husband. My husband had 5 knee surgeries. And his good knee started acting up, and he used 2 of the Lifewave patches, one on either side of his knee, and he couldn't believe the difference. And Lifewave works on a subtle level. You notice that if you have a cold, it doesn't develop into this endless cough. You get over it in 3 days instead of 3 weeks. You notice that you have more energy, more stamina, and it's so difficult to describe, but it works on such a subtle level. I have friends that I shared it with, and they have been surprised that they heal faster. Their emotional outlook is brighter. And everyone's different. I had a friend who's horrible rheumatoid arthritis. So she's working with it. And she said, there's so much in my body that needs repair. It's working on a slow level, but I sleep at night and I haven't had a night's sleep in a while without taking a drug. So it's very subtle. I love it. My husband loves it. My son has been super tired working on a project, so I used one of the patches energy enhancer on his shoulders this morning, and I'm going to see how he is tonight. He's a pretty significant mechanic.
Yeah.
So that I do think it helps your auric field and makes you stronger.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Our full disclaimer: I was a Lifewave distributor for about a year, so I've used a lot of the patches. I found them amazingly helpful. I stopped literally just because of financial reasons, and we don't get the full range of patches in Australia, but I was very curious when you brought up the energy side of and your immune system in terms of psychic defense and protection, and I knew that you had tried them. It's again one of those things that you pull in from your past and you're like, I learned about that. I spent a lot of time watching every single video, reading every single document, reading all the studies. I wonder, and then I let it go, and now my brain just went, tick, tick. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's another layer. There's another layer. Very interesting. So that's why I asked the question.
Yes, I'm significantly older than you are. And so I wanted to make sure that I've done everything I can do to take the best possible care of this body on a psychic and physical level, so that when it's my time to cross over, then I can say I did everything I could.
Yeah. Thank you. That was very interesting. I hadn't ever connected the immune system to psychic protection and the aura. So that's all been very fascinating. Thank you. It makes complete sense, but I just never thought of it like that before. And so there may be some people who've been listening to this who are thinking, oh my God, I can't keep up with all this. How am I going to get the notes? There will be the show notes transcripts that you can get when you click on the episode, but also there's some books that Tina has written that go through this. So Tina, would you mind just taking a second to holding up the books that have the relevant information that we're talking about today that people can read and get a copy of?
This one is, I'll take this out. Karma and Frequency. It discusses a great deal of these things that help you understand an awful lot of it. To understand what happens when you're dealing with darknesses and different kinds of haunting, ghost stories from the ghost point of view. And there are 3 books that explain an enormous amount about how haunting works, how psychic ability works, how you can protect yourself from these things and what they mean. Because at the end of the day, you want to take your power back.
It's very interesting.
Feel like a victim.
When I've read them, I read them in reverse order. And it's interesting because I was just originally, to be honest, just expecting stories, right? Mm-hmm. And the more books I read, the more I'm like, as I said to you, I got them all on Kindle, and I'm like highlighting them on Kindle because I'm like not expecting that ghost stories would contain so much valuable, no insult to you, but no information that's like note taking. You're learning a lesson in each of the stories, and it's I need to get these as physical copies now because I've made notes all over them and they were Kindle Unlimited. I've got to send them back. So now they're not just stories, people. They have valuable information in that. You want to highlight these books and take notes. I know some people don't like defacing books, but get a pen and pad and take notes as the stories are revealed to you because they contain important information.
And I appreciate that. They do. A lot of people just focus on the stories, but understanding there are like 10 different kinds of haunting alone, and understanding that psychic attacks can be, they're incredible, or a ghost can hurt you from 400 years ago and have no idea that it's causing you problems. And you don't understand it, but you're not crazy. Just because you can't physically see it with these eyes doesn't mean another part of you isn't seeing it, feeling it, and experiencing it. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And that's where we will leave this week's episode. Next week, we will continue on to find out some more fascinating things about protecting yourself and about how you can make sure that your aura is strong and healthy, and a whole bunch of other things that you could never imagine that Tina and I will discuss. So can't wait to continue the interview next week. Until then, take care and namaste.